I made my last dress out of fabric remnants from my curtains. So today I'm using fabric remnants from the lining of my curtains to make a little black dress with buttons down the front of it as the fourth piece of clothing in my capsule wardrobe. I have over a yard of fabric left over after using that duvet cover to make my curtain lining. But I found the shans, the pillow shans that went with that duvet cover. So I have maybe 3 or 4 yards of fabric all together. And that's exciting because that means I might be able to make sleeves. So ideally I'm going to have a half sleeve on this dress with a full princess seam bodice. But my old princess seam bodice doesn't really fit anymore, so I'm going to have to draft a new one. I drafted this princess seam bodice the exact same way I've drafted every princess seam bodice in the past. I started with the front panel that starts at the shoulder, cuts straight down the center line to the waist, and curves around the apex of the bust. Then I drafted the complementary front side panel that also curves around the apex of the bust and sits underneath the armpit. And I like to draft extra ease underneath the armpit here because it's the easiest place to add or remove ease when you're using a princess seam pattern. On the back side, I created a back yoke that covers the shoulder and upper back area. Drafting the back center panel is very similar to the front center panel. It cuts straight down the back and the apex of the back. Not sure if that's a technical term or not. And the back side panel sits evenly between the yoke, the back center piece, and the front side piece. And I do try to match the ease on the back side panel to the front side panel. Then I drafted a sort of hem around the hip waist area to ensure all my panels lined up around the bottom. Then I touched up the corners of my pattern with a dark marker to ensure that all my pattern pieces fit together perfectly. And I trimmed up all the edges of my pattern pieces. And I also marked all of my pattern pieces so I knew where they would go. My bodice pattern is mostly done at this point. I have all of my princess seams in place and the basic structure of the bodice is drafted. But you might have noticed I haven't drafted the sleeve yet, and that's because I had to draft the basic part of the bodice first to take my measurements. I used my pattern on my dress form to measure the full length of my sleeve cap as well as the desired depth. Then I used my own arm to measure how wide I want my sleeve to be as well as the length. I measured the desired 6-inch height for my sleeve cap and the desired 12-inch total length for the sleeve. Then I marked out the width of my sleeve at both the elbow and the armpit, or bottom of the sleeve cap. And I traced a sleeve cap, my desired sleeve cap length. And I connected the dots from the armpit to the elbow. And I redrafted my pattern with some slightly larger measurements because I want my sleeve to fit just a little bit loosely. Now I have a finished bodice pattern. So I laid out all the pieces of my duvet cover and my pillow shams and started lining my pattern up to see what the best way to utilize all these squares and rectangles of fabric would be. I pinned each pattern piece to 2 pieces thick of fabric for a left and right side of my pattern pieces. Since I didn't want to mess with a mock-up for this dress, I gave myself a generous seam allowance when cutting out my pattern pieces so I can make any adjustments I need to down the road. So I had 2 front center pieces, 2 front side pieces, 2 back side pieces, 2 back center pieces, and 1 yoke from the back that I had cut along the fold line. And 2 little elbow length sleeves. Don't eat the pins. You can stay here if you don't eat the pins. Kojo. Alright, that's fine. So I have all of my bodice pattern pieces cut out, and I'm fairly happy with the results so far because I still have this nice long duvet cover panel left to make a really long flowy skirt on the bottom of this bodice. And if I do start sewing this bodice together and it doesn't really work right and I need to recut panels or redraft it, I will have extra fabric to do that. So I'm feeling like I'm in a really good spot right now. And now it's time to see if this new pattern I drafted actually fits. So I laid out all of my bodice pieces to pin everything together. I placed my center back and side back pieces together, right sides together, and pinned along the back princess seam. This one lined up fairly easily. Then I took those 2 back pieces and laid them together, right sides together, and pinned along the back center seam, which is the easiest one to line up. And I checked to make sure the top of my back piece lined up with my yoke. Moving on to the front of the bodice, which is the most difficult part of princess seams. I placed my front side panel down, right side facing up, and laid the front center panel on top of that, right side down. I started at the very top and very carefully and slowly pinned the longest, most difficult princess seam together, ensuring that that seam would look nice and smooth in my final garment. And if you feel like this seam is not coming together properly, then clip your seam allowance a little bit narrower, because the thinner your seam allowance is on this princess seam, the easier it will be to line up and sew together. And when you look at it closely, you should not find any puckers within that seam line. I had to test a few different needles out with this fabric just to see what one worked the best. And once I found a nice thin needle that worked well, I got to sewing my bodice together. I sewed the 3 back seams first because they're the easiest, and these all came out very smoothly. Then I very carefully tackled sewing my front princess seam together. I broke out my tailor's ham to make ironing these princess seams a little bit easier for me, but in the past I have sewn these without a tailor's ham and ironed them without a tailor's ham. So don't let not having a tailor's ham discourage you from ironing, because when you are making a princess seam garment, ironing is the biggest thing you can do to make your princess seams fit better and lay right and look good. So even if you're lazy at sewing and ironing and you usually try to skip ironing, I can't stress enough, don't do that right now. Make sure you get your iron out and iron your princess seams. I'm having just a little difficulty deciding if this fits or if I'm having a fit issue, because everything seems to fit my dress form just fine, but when I put it on myself, something about this side seam just doesn't feel right. But I don't really know what I would do to fix it, so I'm gonna try and move on to the next step and then try it on again. But before I attach the back yoke, I have to finish all of these seams because once I sew them to the yoke, it's not going to be easy to finish these seams later. So let's go to the serger. So I moved on to serging the raw edges of my seam allowances. Now, if you don't have a serger, you still want to finish these princess seams because they're going to be really easy to tear being on that kind of bias edge. So clip them as narrow as possible to like maybe 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, and sew the edge with either a zigzag stitch or seam tape. Then I took the shoulders of my yoke and placed them on top of the shoulders of my front pattern piece, right sides together. Then I pinned my shoulder seams together and placed the yoke on top of that back piece, right side facing down. And I pinned my back yoke to my back piece. I sewed together the 3 seams of my yoke. Now, before I sew the sleeves on, I am pinning my side seams together so I can try my bodice on and work out any fitting issues I need to focus on here. I don't like it. I think it sits too high. I think the whole thing is just like 1 inch or 2 too high. But I think there might be a chance that if I just take the back yoke and trim it, maybe I can bring everything forward. That'll bring the front down. So I folded my yoke in half and trimmed a new neckline in the back of it. And I also pinned out some of the ease to see if that helped it fit better. We have a slight improvement. I don't know if it's enough of an improvement to say I'm happy with it, but I think if I pinched out maybe just a little bit on the arm side here, that maybe I would be happy enough with this to use it. So I think I'm gonna try and salvage this top, and if I ever want to do another princess seam bodice or dress, I will redraft this part of the pattern. So I trimmed up the arm size and trimmed out the ease on the sides. I removed all of my pins and serged the raw edges of my yoke seams. Still not skimping on the ironing. And now we can add the sleeves. So I laid out my sleeves right side facing up and laid the arm side of my bodice over each sleeve. I pinned the outside edges first and pinned a little bit of a gather into the top of the sleeve. I sewed my sleeves on with my sewing machine and then finished the raw edges with my serger. And I also used my tailor's ham to press my sleeve seams. Then I folded my sleeves in half and lined up my side seams, pinned everything in place, sewed my side seams down, finished my side seams with my serger, and ironed my side seams. It's not perfect, but I think I can live with that. I do still have to figure out what I'm doing with this neckline and the buttons, but I'm done for the day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Sometimes we have to have difficult conversations with ourselves about our sewing, and I've been having one of those conversations with myself all morning, and I'm going to use this dress to illustrate that conversation I've been having with myself. This is a medium Shein dress that I bought for 17 cents at a thrift store. And while it might fit like a medium on the bottom, probably closer to a large. It fits like an XL on top, and the waistline doesn't exactly line up with mine. Meaning it does have some comparable fit issues as the dress I'm making. Does it fit perfectly? No. Does it fit on my body? Yes. Is it comfortable? Mostly. Now, when I go shopping for ready to wear, which I don't do a whole lot, I ask myself 3 questions. So when I ask myself those 3 questions for this dress, do I like it? Yeah, it's cute. It fits me fairly well. I like the way I look and feel in this dress. Would I wear this dress? Absolutely. I would wear it to film a video. I'd wear it on a date night with my husband. I probably wouldn't wear it to work because it's a little bit short for that, but I would definitely wear it. Is it worth it? Yeah, it was definitely worth 17 cents. Now, if I ask myself those same 3 questions about the dress I'm making, do I like it? Not really. Would I wear it? Yeah, probably. I have a lot of clothes that don't fit properly and I still wear those. And the biggest one is it worth spending a month making this dress? No, not really, because I don't like it. So then I asked myself, since I am sewing it and I've already put a few weeks into it, is it worth tearing apart and redrafting all or part of it? No, because I would have done that yesterday if it were. So the final question I've asked myself is, would it be worth putting another weekend or 2 into finishing this dress so I can wear it, since I said I probably would? And the answer is yeah, I think it probably would, especially if I can find some cute buttons and make a skirt that would make it so I liked it. So that's what we're gonna do today. I'm going to create a new neckline here and find some buttons that I like. So I marked out a scoopy neckline that I thought would be flattering and trimmed it evenly on both sides. Then I fitted the neckline around the center seam and trimmed it up just to make it a little bit more flattering. And I drafted a facing for my neckline. I attached that facing with a few pins and sewed it onto the top of my neckline. And I pressed it to the inside. I pressed up the bottom of the facing and sewed around it with a top stitch. I drafted a button placket based on the length of the front center seam. And I should have made these both the same size, but I ended up making one narrower than the other. I also cut out 2 pieces of interfacing, about half the width of each piece of my button placket. I pinned my interfacing to the wrong side of my button placket and basted it on with my sewing machine. Then I folded my button placket right sides together and stitched the top closed in the angle of my new neckline. Then I turned the placket right side out and pressed everything flat. And I trimmed out some of the center seam to allow for the excess ease of the button placket. Then I placed my bodice right side facing up and overlapped my button placket outside facing down and pinned my button placket to the center front seam. Then I sewed down my button placket with a straight stitch and finished the raw edge of that seam with my serger. And when I pressed it, I pressed that seam away from the button placket. And I pilfered through my buttons until I found a set that was exciting to work with. that was a pretty quick and painless decision to make. I really narrowed it down pretty quickly. These small buttons, like even though these cameos are gorgeous, they're just not big enough for this button placket. They get swallowed up. Same with these like medium size buttons. They're just not big enough for the placket. These disco balls are kind of fun, but again, they're still a little bit too small. I don't want to use these skull buttons yet. I've been saving those for something else. The buttons I had picked out last time for my skirt, I actually do like them on this, sort of, but I don't love them. And then these anchors are cool. I think this is the first thing I've made that I actually thought the anchors would look good on, but then these, they're like a vintage style button. They have like little beads on top. These are perfect. These are exactly what I need for this dress to make me like something on it, make me love something on it. I marked my buttons and buttonholes out with pins and then basting stitches, 2.5 inches apart. I sewed on each of my 6 buttons by hand. And my first test button actually came out well. So I sewed my buttonholes onto my bodice using my sewing machine and my buttonholer foot. And just like with the skirt I made earlier in my capsule wardrobe, I drew my threads to the back side of my button placket, tied them off, and weaved them through the stitches of my buttonhole. This is a tedious process, but I really feel like it strengthens the buttonhole. Harumph! Harumph, I say! I'm starting to like this. I do love these buttons, but I still don't love the way it fits. This curve here just does not, it doesn't fit right, but it's looking better. So I think the answer to that question, is it worth it? If it keeps going in this direction with the cute buttons, and if I like the skirt on it, then I think it might be worth it in the end. But I'm not doing the skirt today. That's gonna happen another time. Hey, where have you been? What? Hi, sweetie. Oh, it's Cujo. Hi, buddy. Oh, you're a good boy. I'm gonna finish this dress today. Even though I'm tired, feel like crap, I don't have the energy for it, I'm gonna finish it today. And since I managed to use only pillow shams to make the bodice, because I did alterations rather than redrafting it, I have plenty of the duvet cover left to make this skirt. And I'm thinking, since I have so much fabric to work with, that a nice handkerchief hem would look really cute on this dress. I pinched out a 1/2 inch dart on the right shoulder to remove some gapping that I didn't want on the neckline. And I trimmed up the hemline of my bodice to fit evenly all the way around. Then I sewed the bottom of my 2 button plackets together and measured the total length of the hemline of my bodice. And I used that measurement to draft a circle, which served as the center measurement for my handkerchief skirt. I overlaid my 2 duvet cover pieces as 2 halves of the skirt. I pinned them together and I serged them down the center line and ironed everything nice and flat. I refolded this skirt fabric in half and overlaid my circle on the waist. I cut my circle out, making sure to add in seam allowance. Then I folded this skirt into quarters and used a little bit of measurement and a little bit of freehand to draft a right angle. The straighter the edges here, the easier it will be to hem later. Then I overlaid my bodice and my skirt right sides together and pinned the waist of my skirt to the waist of my bodice. And I had to tuck in a little excess pleat at the back. I sewed the skirt to my bodice using my sewing machine and then serged the raw edges of my seam. I tied and tucked in my serger edges and ironed everything flat. Then I serged the raw edges of my hem of my skirt and the hem of my sleeves, folded everything up once with my iron, and sewed the hems down with my sewing machine. Okay, I have seen enough. Not only does wearing a belt with this dress totally fix that too baggy in the waist fit issue I was having, but it looks totally sick with my dragon belt. And while I was trying all these clothes on and showing them off with different looks for this dress, I totally forgot about how bad I was feeling today because it put me in a good mood. It made me feel good. It was fun to wear. It was fun to show off. So I'm gonna re-answer those 3 questions I ask myself when I buy clothing, or in this case, makeup clothing. Number 1, do I like it? Absolutely. I actually love this now that it's finished. I think the sleeve is just such a perfect length. It's so hard to find elbow length sleeves. It's easy to find like a cap, or even like a 3/4 is easy, but I can never find these just exactly elbow length sleeves. So these sleeves are perfect. I also love, love, love these buttons. And oh, this handkerchief hem. Question 2, would I wear this dress? And that's gonna be a resounding yes, absolutely, I will wear this dress now. I've done a complete 180 on how much I like this dress, and that would definitely affect how much I want to wear it. And question number 3, which is the big one for this dress, is was it worth it? And that's difficult when you are sewing clothing for yourself, because you have to ask, Were all the fit adjustments worth it? Was it worth the cost of the materials? You know, the buttons were not cheap. Was it worth putting the time and effort into making this when all month I really was just exhausted and tired and felt like crap? And after seeing it on myself with the different options and really feeling good wearing this today, I have to say yes, it was. And that's really a big improvement from even this morning, because before I tried this dress on today, it was gonna be a maybe. So I'm really glad that that has turned into a yes, yes, yes. It is worth it. It is something I will wear and I like it. What? You're such a crybaby. Meow. It is pouring outside right now, so Kojo's just a little antsy. Get the poor baby some love. Love you, dude. So I am feeling super confident going into the rest of my capsule wardrobe. This is 4 pieces in, and I'm really excited with what's happening with the clothes I'm making and where this is going. So if you guys are just as excited to see the rest of my capsule wardrobe as I am, make sure you hit that like button, make sure you hit that subscribe button, maybe even leave a comment down below. Y'all would really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching my video today. We will see you guys next time. What are you doing, dude? You're such a weirdo.